Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Bradley. I'm the State Extension Weed Scientist here at the University of Missouri. I'm going to talk to you today in the latest video from our Take Action series about some non-conventional weed management practices we've been evaluating over the past couple of years. You know, often what I get as soon as I start talking about these, and maybe some of you are thinking it already, is why would we be interested in listening to this, or why are you even doing research on this? And so I've heard all of that before. I've heard it called weird and everything else. And the fact of the matter is, our herbicide resistance problem has gotten us into this situation. And that's why we believe that these things that we're going to be talking about might be a part of our future production. And that's why we're looking into them now. So, you know, it's kind of all of our fault collectively. I'm not going to put the blame on any one segment of our industry or anything else like that. But many of us have been conditioned to think that, you know, if you want to get control of weeds in big time agriculture, then we're going to do that with herbicides. And that's what we call a herbicide centric mindset. And there's been many polls done that have shown, you know, basically farmer attitude and even retailer attitude is that, you know, if you ask them a question, you know, they will answer it that in the future there will be something that solves our problem, and that something is a herbicide or a trait or a combination of a herbicide and a trait. So farmers in general are very techno-optimistic. They believe a solution is coming because, quite frankly, in the past, there always has been some kind of solution. So that's the second reason for this kind of mindset. And the third reason for us looking at these different new / weird, whatever you want to call them, devices and ways of doing weed control is that, you know, when you think about it, we have not seen any evidence of herbicide resistance going away, particularly in the pigweed species. Most of the people that have been dealing with will resonate with them. You know, it doesn't get better. We have multiple resistance as the major problem on most of our U.S. cropland. Probably, certainly the most problematic two weeds are in the amaranthus family, the Palmer amaranth in primarily the South, and waterhemp in primarily the Midwest, although there is some cross traffic in between those two, and Palmer amaranth has spread outside of its initial geography. So the bottom line is, you know, we are dealing with some problems that are pretty major. You know, water hemp in the U.S. right now has 7 different types of resistance. In other words, it has evolved resistance to 7 different modes of action. I mean, at what point do you just say and admit that, hey, we've got to do something other than just herbicides? Hopefully that's where we were a long time ago. Maybe we could have done better, but certainly in recent years, one of the things we've been looking at more and more is some devices that basically are aimed at not letting these pigweeds in particular ever produce seed or put them back onto the soil surface. So we're trying to deplete our soil seed bank with these implements. And so very simply, I'm going to talk about 2 of them briefly, totally separate. One really has nothing to do with the other, but we're just going to kind of give you some highlights, give you some take homes, 4 or 5 bullet points about what our research has shown with these so far, and you could take it and do with it what you feel is appropriate for your individual state and your individual field. The first thing we're going to talk about is weed electrocution. Now, I know that might sound really crazy, but weed electrocution is not anything new. There was weed electrocution devices 30 years ago. I think the difference is the amount of electricity that we can now get into these devices and how they're designed and all of that. So here's a picture of one of these implements, probably one of the more popular ones. This is called the Weed Zapper. It's actually made and manufactured right here in Missouri, in Sedalia, Missouri. And this young lady standing here is Haley Schreier. She's a graduate student that has been evaluating this for us last year and will continue to do so this year. So it's her master's research project. And so just a little bit about how these things, or how this one works. It's a little hard to see, but down in there, out on the front of this is a long copper boom. In this case, it's 15 feet in width, but you can go up to 30 feet with this one, and maybe even more than that now. I'm not sure where they are with all of that. So the boom on the front, you must have contact with the weed in question to actually get the electrocution to occur. The PTO is running or powering a generator on the back that's creating all the electricity, and that's what you see, that big box on the back. So, and like I said, some of the way earlier versions from the 70s and 80s were not, I don't think, we're anywhere close to being able to generate this type of electricity. So if you want to see one in action, this is early season us running the weed zapper implement. Some of these, and quite frankly, more of the ones that are bought and used commercially, the growers usually would choose to use a front mounted PTO rather than the boom front end loader bucket setup that we have, but this is what we needed to do for our research. A lot of people get excited and like to see the fire and all of that and flames. I would just say that's not normally going to occur, particularly in the way in which we think this device is most suited. This is very early season. This is on ragweed. And so underneath all of that is a lot of dead winter annual, basically tinder, kindling, if you will. And so that's what's creating those sparks. And it's probably not the way that I would recommend that we would most commonly want to use this device. So what do we want to do with this, or what could be a potential application? Well, it's pretty much shown right here. In my opinion, this is one of those fields that I think most everybody has seen at, let's just say, sometime in July in most of the parts of the Midwest, where something has gone wrong. And whether that's the herbicide program failed, whether we have resistance, just didn't make a timely application, whatever it is, the waterhemp, or it could be Palmer amaranth, or perhaps it's some other weed, did not get controlled. And can we do anything about that? And legally, according to just about every herbicide label that I know of, and also considering how many different types of resistances are commonly in our pigweed species, my answer to that question is no. There is no herbicide. We're just going to have to take what we can get as far as yields, and unfortunately, that seed is more than likely going back into the soil. This device changes that answer, though, and I'm not saying we're there yet, but could we modify what you've seen on the previous screens and make this more suitable for conventional agriculture, and would it work? And that's kind of where we come from with our research on all of this. So, very quickly, without a lot of data and everything, and if you want more details, we do have data and more slideshows on our website, weedscience.missouri.edu. But I think I just have like 5 bullet points here with basically some pictures for me to just kind of jolt my memory and talk over these. Number one, I think it's appropriate for me to point out, as the manufacturer of the device itself would, I think, that this is not just simple as spraying. This is dangerous. It can be dangerous. And we all need to recognize that, you know, it's got a lot of safeguards on it. But if someone comes in close contact with this device, it's going to harm them. So we stay at least 50 feet away from the tractor when it's working at all times, and we have had zero problems, but we're also very careful with it. So getting more into the kind of nuts and bolts of what we found, I think it's pretty clear this is not a season-long weed management tool or anything like that. This is meant to be integrated in with herbicides if we ever use it in a conventional soybean production system. You know, it's meant for bigger weeds later in the season, and I think that's where it might have its fit. It is very good on big weeds, tall weeds is what I mean by that. You know, seedlings, it's not very good just because you're not going to get the contact with anything that small, and you're probably going to miss some things down in there. So mare's tail, it has been very good on. And like I said, as the weeds get bigger and bigger, the more likelihood you're going to control them. It's kind of opposite of what we see out of you know, what we would say about herbicides. As far as specifically, we've had this in just a location or two for 1 year. It was 2020, and we are planning to expand that research next year on more and more sites with more diverse species. But so far, we've found this to be very effective on waterhemp, the ragweed species, mare's tail, like I've said already, and cockleburr. A little bit less so on the foxtails and barnyard grass, but again, we have more work to do. But we know that it probably is something that can help us out on those late season pigweed infestations like I showed earlier. So switching gears entirely, moving right into our second topic of on combine seed destruction devices. We're going to talk about one in particular and our results with it over the past couple of years, and that's called the seed Terminator. And so this was some collaborative research that we were able to do with Case IH, with this particular company in Australia, Seed Terminator, and with funding from the United Soybean Board and Missouri Soybean Board. And standing here in this picture is our student that's running this project now, is Travis Winans, and he's you know, the one that's actually getting all the data gathered and summarized and all of that. So as with the weed electrocution, this is nothing new, although it is newer than what I mentioned earlier. This is something that the Australians have been working on for, say, let's say a decade or so, something like that. It's much slower to come to the United States. And I think just now a number of university weed scientists are starting to get some of these things in their hands to be able to evaluate it. We've had 2 years of work on the Seed Terminator. I know several of my colleagues just got some different units, Ready Cop units, for example, or Harrington Seed Destructor units just this past fall for use in the 2020 harvest. So like I said, these are not new. If you're not familiar with the concept, here's a slide from a friend of mine, Dr. Barber down in Arkansas, who I don't know where he found this, but it does a good job of illustrating kind of the concept. And the concept is that weed seed are obviously running through the combine and coming out of the back of most normal combines today. If we can harness that seed and capture it and run it through a hammer mill or cage mill, and get those seed ground up and be not viable, that's pretty much what we're trying to do. And so that's what these companies have been founded on. There's hundreds of commercial units running in the fields in Australia already, of various different kinds of these. And we just evaluated one of them, which is called the Seed Terminator. So again, another little video here if you want to see kind of one running in the field. This is one of our harvest locations. These are pretty big experiments. We're talking 40 to 60 acre, experiments. Plots are, I think a minimum of an acre and a half or something in size, and usually bigger than that. But anyway, what you see there is, if you see these two streams out of both sides of the back of the combine, that's probably going to be something that raises your eyebrows if you're familiar with combines, and you'd say, well, that doesn't look normal. And that's true. It's not. That's because this is a dual cage mill configuration, and that's the ejection port, if you will, for all the chaff that's been ground up, all the weed seed that's been ground up, and all of that, and all that dust that's generated in both sides is what we're seeing there come out of the back of that combine. So obviously our premise, or one of the main things we wanted to look at in this project, is where are all the places weed seed could exit the combine. And because of our problems with water hemp in Missouri and the Midwest, we pretty much have focused on water hemp so far, and really are most interested in whether we can do anything with these devices of the pigweed species. So everywhere you see a question mark is somewhere that we have or are actively researching, as far as what percent of the weed seed goes to the grain tank, what percent of the weed seed is spit out of the back of a combine through the straw chopper, what percent of the weed seed is lost to the header and never makes it in. And that was kind of something new that at least I couldn't find anybody really done much on before, is this concept of header loss of weed seed. And obviously it occurs as that reel is beating those weeds, there's going to be some seed spread. So can we put a number to that? And so that's all part of what we were doing in this project. And we do have, some answers for you. So just like with the weed electrocution, I've got, 4 or 5 points here. Number one is green weeds are bad. Frost is good when it comes to these devices. We're going to really try to hone in on that even more and look into some of our weather data and some of our harvests that we've done, and try to tease that out even a little bit better. But I feel pretty safe in saying that the earlier the frost, the better these machines are going to run. They have been tried and tested in a different environment in Australia, where they're harvesting wheat on really dry weeds and really dry crop. And so that might not be the case in US soybeans. But so the further north you go and the earlier you get your frost, probably the more amenable these devices are going to be to working out for you. But there's still quite a bit to be done there among my colleagues who are working with all these different things across different geographies. I kind of already let the little bit slip here on this one when I mentioned the header loss. I described it earlier. Here's a slow motion video of a combine header, this combine header going over, in this case, some velvet leaf, but we found the same thing happens with our pigweeds. And I don't know how good that shows up, but what we see is a sprinkling down of some of those seeds, and they never made it into the header. And so we've seen that happen. And so basically, on a normal combine situation that doesn't have seed terminator or anything else, this is really irrelevant of whether you have a seed terminator or not. We found that with water hemp in particular, across all the locations we've harvested so far, we're getting about a third of the total amount lost to shatter from the header coming in contact. Now, do I think something can be done about that, and maybe we can change that number and alter some things? Yes, but I think it's just going to take some time and probably some engineers. Third thing is, I don't think it's anybody's surprise here. Most of our weed seed gets lost out of the back of the combine. That's what we already knew. And that's why we are looking at these, is hopefully we can change that from being spread out of the straw chopper to going into the seed terminator. But, you know, if you just do the math here on a normal combine that doesn't have the seed terminator, about 66% of our seed is going to go out that way. Now, having said all of that, in the research that I'm showing here right now from 2019, we did not look at grain tank loss of weed seed. And so I don't have that number for you, and that's why there's still a big question mark up there. But all of our initial data that we do have shows that number is going to be very small. So more on that to come in the future. So based on what we've gathered so far, and we do have more numbers to crunch and more samples to process, about 72% of the water hemp seed that passes into the combine makes it into the seed terminator, and the vast majority of that is rendered non-viable. As you can see there, about 92% of that is non-viable. So it's not 100%. We never thought it would be, and quite frankly have been surprised at how good it is, considering how very, very small these weed seed are, these water hemp seed are. And so this is a microscope picture taken through a microscope. I don't know if you all are familiar as much with the size of water hemp seed as we are as weed scientists, but the scale here would be, each one of those seeds would be less than a millimeter for sure. And so you can see here what we're doing to these water hemp seed. We're really damaging the coat and breaking them up and cutting them in half. And these are the ones that actually get recovered, and there's plenty more that are just basically ground up into dust. So a lot of people always ask about the, you know, the combine performance. We really haven't seen any problem. We've never clogged in any of the work we've done with these class 8 case combines, which they have so generously allowed us to work with. You can see all the data here, the numbers about, you know, it is gonna take a little more of your engine load. Can you tell that from inside the combine? No, I have not been able to tell that. It's more fuel consumption, and it's probably going to slow you down just a tad, but not very much at all. And the last thing that I would say is, I kind of already said it, there is no 100% when it comes to the pigweeds with anything. And this is no different. This is not a silver bullet, neither is the electrocution. And what we have seen is for locations that have high number of seed in the soil, like what you see here, this kind of density, we're not seeing any major reductions in 1 year. We're not seeing significant reductions. We are seeing reductions of the seed bank, but are they statistically significant? No. For the locations that we saw where their numbers were already much less, lower, some of the lowest density locations, we did see a reduction 1 year after treatment in the soil seed bank. What I'm really interested in seeing is what 2 years in a row does for some of these locations, and that data is to be coming this spring once we're able to go out there and do some counts when water hemp comes up again. I think there will be a gradual decline in the seed bank year after year. Some of our impressions so far and some of our data are already kind of are pointing us down that road, but we'll just have to wait and see. Basically, I think going back to this whole thing of why you do something this weird, anything that keeps weed seed from returning to the soil will be valuable for U.S. farmers. I believe that wholeheartedly. And it might be that we need some more adjustments. We need some more engineering for these conditions in the United States. But I think there's certainly plenty of people that can make that happen. Obviously, none of this is possible without all these collaborators. I already mentioned several of them. Just going back and mentioning that again, we would not be able to do this work, and so we're thankful for that. And anytime you want to connect with us, you can contact us through email or follow us on our social media, and we'll be glad to try to answer any questions about any of this or anything else that you might have. Thanks for your attention today, and I hope everybody has a good, safe, healthy season ahead.